DW Africa Link.
Ghana's cocoa sector is under pressure. The government recently cut the producer price by 28% for the rest of the season, and many farmers say it feels like an attack. That's a huge blow for the world's second largest cocoa producer, where more than 800,000 farming households rely on the crop for their livelihoods.
What I can say is the manner in which the reduction occurred is too steep. We anticipated a reduction, but in excess of 1,000 cedis is a bit challenging.
As much as say they got 3,625.
The reduction from 3,625 to some 2,500 to us farmers, it's bad news.
So what caused this sharp price cut? And what does it mean for the future of Ghana's cocoa industry? That's what's coming up. I am Eddie Micah Jr., and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
The Ghanaian government says it had little choice but to reduce cocoa prices after a sharp drop on the global market. Let me break this down. Prices had climbed above $7,000 per ton during supply shortages, but they've since plummeted to around $4,000. Since Ghana guarantees farmers a fixed price at the start of the season, the government suddenly found itself paying far more than international buyers were willing to offer. In simple terms, Ghanaian cocoa became too expensive, so traders turned to cheaper suppliers, notably Cote d'Ivoire, the world's top producer. Let's dig deeper with those closest to the story. I'm joined by Nana Iduna II, spokesperson for the Ghana National Association of Cocoa Farmers and a cocoa entrepreneur. I also have Eric Mawena Egbeta, DW correspondent in Accra, Ghana. Nana, what's your reaction to this 28% price cut? That's a heavy blow for farmers, isn't it?
No, it's not good news at all. In fact, we experience it as very punitive and knee-jerk and reactionary. And so that's unfortunately the experience we as farmers are feeling here.
Right. And hit the nail on the head when you say it's a knee-jerk reaction, it's a bad move from the government. Why exactly do you say so?
Okay, let me start from the perspective of cocoa, running a cocoa farm and the value add that's added onto it. It's a business, so there are costs, there are cost outlays, there are all kinds of things that we need to be able to do to deliver whether the cocoa as being extra. So when you come and we were struggling with the initial producer price, which was 3,600 and something. We were struggling with that already, and now you reduce that by further 1,000 Ghana cedis, which is really that's about $100, which is significant. The major challenges in the cocoa sector really are, especially from a cost perspective now, labor is very expensive. You have to compete. Plus, also the other thing that it's not made a lot of noise about is the average age of the cocoa farmer in the cocoa sector in Ghana is actually 64 years old. The reason why it is not attractive at the moment is that there's this fixed price model, which basically then locks you in, and so you don't make enough so you can reinvest to whether improve your farm, etc. Plus, because we are stuck in an outmoded system where there is more focus on the cutlass or the machete and the whole more labor intensive rather than moving to stuff like mechanized tools, automated spraying machines.
This cut sounds like a big deal, right? What is the direct impact it's having on cocoa producers or cocoa farmers right now?
Well, first and foremost, in the way the cocoa system works, because we know that it's going to be paid cash at a certain point, and when we take our cocoa, people either have either borrowed money to do certain things, etc., ahead of knowing that they're going to get, say, 10 bags of cocoa from the farm. So they've gone to borrow against, if the price was 3,600 per bag, they're going to borrow against that already. So if you now come and then you say it's now 1,000 Ghana cedis less, they're basically in debt. People have to pay school fees, extra. The cocoa, the rural economy is sustained on, and especially around certain times when the major buying seasons, it's sustained on the cash that circulates in the cocoa system. So as you can see, it's a big deal when suddenly overnight, people are basically in debt. Yeah.
Yeah. Are we going to have a case where there's just thousands of tons of cocoa piled up without being sold, or what are we saying?
I do not think so, that there will be lots of unsold cocoa definitely in Ghana. What has been happening over the last few months is that the purchasing clerks from the various buying companies have actually been taking the cocoa more or less on credit and not giving people cash. The key thing about Ghana cocoa is that because of our quality of preparation and premium, etc., it's fairly well sought after. I mean, so the cocoa is being taken. I do not know the details relative to what has been collateralized, what is outstanding from previous deals that Cocoa Board have made. But the Cocoa Board, the cocoa has been taken. The farmers have not been paid. That's the scenario at the moment. So there's not a situation where there are loads of cocoa piled up. No, the cocoa is gone. The farmers have just not been paid.
Right. Thank you for making that clear for us. Let me come to you, Eric. Could the government have done something else?
The reaction has been one that has not excited a lot of people, particularly the cocoa farmers, and most importantly as well, the opposition, who've been leading the charge and accusing the government of giving the farmers a raw deal. Simply put, cocoa conversations is huge politics in Ghana. Every now and then, either the opposition or the main party in government use this as a stake against each other to make the argument that you're not giving cocoa farmers the best of deal, and we are giving the cocoa farmers the best of deal. In fact, when the government announced that 3,625 cedis per bag, they use this as political capital against the opposition to say that you weren't giving farmers the best of deal, and we have come and have given the farmers the best of deal. But now they've had to slash this, and there's been heavy criticism from both farmers and as well members of the opposition, who say that the decision to slash it is unfair. The government should have absorbed the cost for the farmer going into the completion of this farming season. But the explanation from the government, despite all of the criticism, is that if they continue to buy the beans at 3,625 cedis per bag, it is not profitable, and there will be huge costs in terms of running and operating the cocoa sector going forward. And it will make our beans unattractive on the world markets because it will be above the prices that it's being sold. But the conversation continues to come back to the fact that could they have absorbed the cost and allowed for the cocoa farmer to enjoy that 3,625 cedis?
That's a very good question that I'm going to pose to Nana Eduna. Could the government have absorbed that cost?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. But of course, the government could have absorbed that cost. And again, this comes or begs the question again that, our cocoa sector in Ghana has been over politicized. The honest truth is that cocoa is a business and it's not politics. And it's been politicized so much that we've lost our way in terms of how cocoa can be run as a business. And our statutory monopoly, Cocoa Board, at the moment, it is completely uncompetitive. Cocoa Board is a price fixer. Cocoa Board is what it is growing cocoa beans. Cocoa Board is supposed to be promoting consumption. Cocoa Board interacts with whether there's going to be value addition or not. we have to at some stage define what cocoa board's real role is. If there's going to be a cocoa regulator, then it sticks as a cocoa regulator. That's part of the challenge, and then they get into all kinds of things like construction of roads, etc. So the politics behind it does not help the industry, because cocoa should be run properly and strategically as a business. And again, as a cocoa entrepreneur who's then gone beyond understanding just growing the beans, the key money is in the value addition process, whether you're making second generation products like butter, liquor, etc., or fourth generation products like cocoa or husk tea or cosmetics. That's where the value is. So we stuck at this raw bean stage for a long time, which should really be part of the discussion in terms of the reformation of the industry. So that the issues, and then of course, I mean, if we've been growing cocoa for God knows how long in Ghana, 100 years or more, and it was previously the Gold Coast, we should by now be, and knowing that cocoa is also the commodity, we should by now be able to analyze or predict these boom bust cycles.
Who are you laying the blame on right now? Isn't that for cocoa entrepreneurs like you that will have to make that move?
Those are part of the reforms that have to happen. At the moment, the government has messed up, or Cocoa Board have messed up, and they don't have a fund, for example, that will then cushion when there's a low price situation. And when there was actually a high price situation, unfortunately, we were locked in forward at a low price. So again, that's why we say that we don't even know whether they had some outstanding contracts that they have to actually satisfy, because again, when the price went up and they had forward sold, they had some issues with respect to outstanding contracts they had to make up. So just explaining that the cocoa trade and whatever, it's a fairly complex thing. And also the politics of then every 4 years, the personnel at Cocoa Board, and especially the senior level, changing and bringing in politically affiliated people who really do not understand the trade or do not understand. So we have to look at all that. And I mean, if then Cocoa Board has to be restructured or has to go, so that there's a regulator that actually is regulating whether it's the quality of the beans, etc., and a few other things like international trade. And again, looking at a more structured, practical way of whether there's a commodities exchange.
You basically don't trust in the whole cocoa management system in Ghana right now. When we talk about Cocoa Board, as we are all addressing, Mawena, we also understand there's been the syndicated loan model, which was supposed to be helping cocoa farmers. What went wrong?
Well, what went wrong with that is the interest on the loan was quite unsustainable on the books of Cocoa Board. You may have heard Nana speak to Cocoa Board venturing into projects which has left them in 20 billion cedis, in excess of 20 billion cedis in debt, which the government is seeking.
Sorry, can I interject and correct there? It is actually 32 billion, not 20 Ghana cedi, 32 billion Ghana cedi debt. That's what they reported. Yeah.
Because of the restructuring, we got where that they've been able to restructure it to 20 billion. But it was far in excess of the amounts that you stated, and the fact that some of it is being even moved on to the books of the Bank of Ghana and then the Ministry of Finance to provide some room for some liquidity as well for Cocoa Board only suggests that it's been a place that has had quite the difficulty in being able to manage its own affairs and be able to manage the cocoa farmer and set the appropriate price to ensure that the farmers benefit. On matters of the syndicated loan as well, like I mentioned, the interests were quite unsustainable, and that was one of the models which was being adopted in the sale of the cocoa beans. Since the interests were a bit too high and the debts were mounting out of road contracts which had been handed out and what have you, a decision was reached in 2024 that, look,
continuing to proceed on the syndicated loan platform was unsustainable because even the creditors were not willing to come through to provide the financing that was needed. And so in 2024, getting into 2025, the approach was for financing to be sought locally. And that is what sought to end the syndicated loan structure. And it appears the strategy was that the syndicated loan came with forward selling of the cocoa beans. And since that was not happening, we were witnessing a bit more in terms of spot sales, which have negatively affected this particular cocoa season because once the price have dropped on the international market, the set prices with which we enter the market with are no longer sustainable for any business and has resulted in these slashes, which quite rightly the cocoa farmers are not happy about.
Right. As you say, cocoa farmers are not happy about this price slash. So, Nane Duna, what are you going to do about it? I mean, how are cocoa farmers going to get the attention of government to deal with this issue?
You know, the government is in a very difficult place because, I mean, if you know the history of Ghana and you know the relationship with cocoa, you know that once you mess up in that area, you know your life, your lifespan starts to look pretty bleak.
Are we talking demonstrations, protests? How are you going to get the government's attention?
I think the government's attention has been got. So the government survives or improves whatever based on some of the decisions that they take. Look, at the moment, it's not even just a government versus farmer or whatever thing. It's the life of the industry. And the industry, the cocoa sector in Ghana has actually needed reforms for a long time. So this might be the catalyst. Yeah, sure. So I think the immediate thing is to find money to pay the farmers.
Where's the money going to come from?
Well, that's really the government's decision as to whether they go and borrow, as to whatever financial engineering they come up with. That's really an immediate thing. Of course, I mean, this also then begets our whole current cocoa model anyway. Cocoa would have to seriously look at restructuring, scaling down on staff, scaling down on what they do extra. So there's an immediate knee-jerk, whatever, which, again, trying to slash, whatever, but finding money to make sure that the farmers are sorted or are satisfied or are happy or extra.
I guess what is important to notice, I mean, the cocoa industry is not the only industry, right? There's so many different industries. There's so many Ghanaians that work in different fields, and everyone would expect more money, right? In their different industries to work it. So it's easier said, obviously, to get money into the cocoa industry, but that may be challenging. Unless, of course, you're offering a way to get that money. What would that be? I want us to start listing top 3 things that need to be done now, realistically, that can help save the cocoa industry and make sure the farmers are not losing out.
Yeah, first and foremost, I think that let's be very frank and blunt about cocoa here. Look, what actually happens in the cocoa sector is that there's a floor price, farm price gate for farmers. Then they go and sell whatever at the landing terminal price. The margin in between is what they use to fund cocoa board operations, fund roads, fund whatever. So with cocoa farm, and this has been a historical thing since when before independence and when the cocoa market, we can go through the whole history of that. But in that respect, cocoa has subsidized and been funding a lot of things already. So it's not now that anybody is going to come and tell us that so the other industry or whatever. No. We know what cocoa has been doing. That's the first thing. Okay. 2. If you're going to find money, fine. You can create whatever. Again, it becomes finance rather than cocoa farming. But there are all kinds of options in terms of creating a bond, like they did with the energy sector. So there are all kinds of options. But the crux of the matter is that what we have right now that is operating is outdated and not fit for purpose. And so we have to look at that. And we have to look at that critically, depoliticizing the industry, stopping this thing where cocoa is like some slush fund for politicians, etc., etc., etc. And that is something that we have to face and look at critically as Ghanaians.
Is there something Ghana can learn from the way Cote d'Ivoire runs its cocoa industry?
Thank you very much. I think we've got a fair bit to learn from the Ivorians in terms of efficiency, the numbers that are employed by their CCC cafe, cacao cafe, Conciel, etc., as compared to cocoa, and a few other things. They've got larger processing capacity, and a few other things that we've got to learn. I think that Ghana does have an advantage in the quality of beans that are produced, and that's something that in the chop and change and whatever that happens at a certain level at cocoa board and so we actually don't even understand our real value and our strength in the industry. So it's not necessarily being producing more. It is focusing on the quality and the things that you do and aligning to the modern trends, whatever traceability, creating proper forests, etc. And of course, importantly, local processing. The truth also is that the Ivorians have a lot more processing capacity actually owned by Ivorians and the Ivorian government. Ghana, despite all our talk, a lot of the processing is still going to be done by foreign companies in the free zones area, which is another policy that we have to look at. Because what frustrates local processing is that we are competing against all these free zones entities, which are the big players in the cocoa sector. Anyway, that's the Cargills and Barry Calibus, extra. And we give them all kinds of crazy incentives, including getting our beans at discounts. So our issues are definitely a lot more complicated than actually just looks on the surface. So when, again, the government says they're going to process 50% or whatever, who are going to be doing that processing?
Okay. Clearly, a lot still needs to be clear and ironed out, and it looks like it's a long way to go. I guess we can only be optimistic. Look at the glass as half full. Although I understand the frustration because this has been talked about for a while, and there doesn't seem to be that much needed change. But yeah, I have understood the cocoa industry a bit more thanks to you guys. So thank you very much for that. Nana Eduna II, spokesperson for the Ghana National Association of Cocoa Farmers, who is also a cocoa entrepreneur. Also, Eric Mawina Egbeta, DW correspondent in Accra, Ghana. He's still thinking about getting into the cocoa industry or business. So we wish him all the best with all the challenges that we've talked about. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Cocoa markets have experienced extreme volatility in recent years. Climate change has disrupted harvests, speculative trading has intensified price fluctuations, and sudden supply shocks have sent prices soaring or crashing. Ultimately, it's ordinary people who suffer the consequences.
What I can say is the manner in which the reduction occurred is too steep. We anticipated a reduction, but in excess of 1,000 cedis is a bit challenging. We've been struggling with the cocoa business. Some have sold since October and didn't receive any money. So news of a reduction is not so great. For a lot of people, they say they haven't benefited from the cocoa business, and that is really worrying. If we receive some additional support, then we can manage with this, because all of the inputs for our farms are very expensive. If they can do something about the inputs for us, we'll manage with this reduction.
Experts say this crisis exposes deep weaknesses, but also real opportunities. Ghana could process more cocoa at home to capture higher value, adopt more flexible pricing instead of rigid guarantees, invest in replanting and climate-resilient farms, strengthen coordination with Cote d'Ivoire to avoid undercutting each other, and improve transparency at the Ghana Cocoa Board, that's Cocoa Board, to rebuild farmers' trust. Because Here's the hard truth. When chocolate prices fall in London or New York, it's a farmer in Ghana who feels the shock first. Share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabe. And I am Eddie Micah Jr. Thanks for listening.
DW. Made for Mind.